Hello and welcome to this edition of TV9 News. The budget is done and dusted. The most anticipated budget 2021, the first one after the pandemic outbreak which was witnessed in India, is now a part of budgetary history. As a part of budget exercise, you do have a dose of taxation. And who better than having Mr. Padam Kincha, a very well-known figure in the area of taxation who has more than 3 decades of experience in the world of taxation, to not just decode but also demystify and discuss this year's tax proposals. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Mr. Padam Kincha for this interaction on what tax proposals have been introduced as far as budget 2021 is concerned. Welcome to have you with us, Mr. Kincha. First of all, sir, personal taxation, a bit of disappointment. People were expecting that, particularly the salaried class, that exemption levels will go up. The outflow of tax that you would do as a salaried person will come down. You will have more money in your pockets. That hasn't happened, right?
More money in the pocket was expected. That government is looking at reviving the economy, and therefore that revival can happen by more spending. Spending can happen through people spending, through savings, and therefore building up expenditure, capital expenditure, or government taking upon itself the task of spending. So with the hope that the encouragement will also happen on the private front, that the capital will be available to the people concerned through a better exemption regime or better savings incentive. People are looking forward to some sort of an exemption increase in the tax slab this year. That has not happened, possibly because of the government not having the resources. If you were to look into last year's finance minister's speech and her calculations, she said that she is calibrating a new type of regime for individuals where they'll be giving up exemptions and they'll pay a staggered rate of tax at 5%, 10%, 15%, 20, 25 and 30. She had a specific regime for these staggered type of tax payments. And she made a statement that even this staggered type of payments with a loss of incentives for an individual is going to cause a loss of 40,000 crores to the government concerned. So this type of fiscal profligacy was not available to the government to give any exemptions, despite the fact that the government had promised in their manifesto that we give you a 5 lakh exemption. That space was not possibly available, and therefore the expectations of the people to say that we will get a higher exemption possibly has remained not satisfied. But on the other hand, we have seen difficult times. Last 12 to 15 months have been difficult times. Increased expenditure, increased inactivity technically, people under lockdown, no incomes coming about. And therefore, the government had to come to the rescue of the people concerned to ensure that the livelihoods of people are maintained. Therefore, the government said we are both concerned about lives as well as livelihood. That's what the economic survey also says. And the government did make a mention that they are concerned with lives and livelihoods. And the government came forward with a massive program of helping people concerned economically and ensuring that, therefore, the suffering the people have is alleviated through cash disbursements and other measures taken. As a result of it, therefore, there was a worry that there could be new taxes to get over this resource crunch of the government concerned. Therefore, there was a worry, and there was a talk before the budget that there will be a vaccine cess or a vaccine surcharge, or there will be a COVID surcharge, not even a vaccine surcharge, there will be a COVID surcharge, or possibly there could be an increased surcharge to tax the ultra-rich people to help them contribute to the requirements of the nation concerned. Luckily, we have been spared of that. No new taxes have been there. There was some buzz of rumors in the high net individuals concerned, high net worths people concerned, to say that inheritance tax could come in. Even that has not happened. And therefore, the non-levy of new taxes itself is a welcome measure. So inaction on part of the government itself is a welcome measure to a lot of people concerned, that yes, we have been spared of the extra burden. And to that extent, that's a positive sign from the government in relation to tax slabs of individuals or tax slabs of other types of entities concerned.
Mr. Kincha, there was one area of worry, because if you were to look at the part 2, you do come across instances where cess has been levied. Now, I want you to demystify what the cess is all about, because on many of the products that we're talking of, does it mean to say that the cess collected goes exclusively to the government of India? The second thing is the cess, particularly when it comes to petroleum products, the rationale being given is that the basic customs duty is being brought down and the cess has been increased. So does it really lead to a situation where I as a consumer will have to now fork out more?
Yeah, there are two things therefore. Inherent duty structure comprises of a basic tax, could be income tax, could be customs duty, could be excise. There is a top up to that in terms of a surcharge or in terms of a cess. Interestingly, the Constitution provides that the tax collected by the government has to be divided between the state and the federal. The finance minister did make a mention that the finance commission has given its report this year that 41% of the tax collections will have to devolve on the states concerned. Therefore, whatever comes into the central pool in terms of taxes has to be shared between the union and all the states concerned. There's a particular mechanism that the finance commission works out and recommends to the government concerned, and the government made a statement that it is accepting that recommendation of the finance commission. But what happens is that this is a divisible pool of the basic taxes and duty structures. What happens by terms of a levy of surcharge and a cess is that it remains only exclusively to the center. And therefore, that is not forming part of the divisible pool. Therefore, if you make a statement that on the petrol there's a reduction of customs duty, then the pool of divisible surplus goes down, but that is compensated by an increase in cess. That cess will remain with the central government concerned, because central government believes that it has taken upon itself the task of meeting and alleviating the conditions arising out of this pandemic. And as a result of it, therefore, it is saying that I will reserve to myself these cesses and surcharges. And therefore, they made a statement that the cess and surcharge are exclusively to be retained by the central government. It does not form part of the divisible pool for the state to lay a claim on the collections towards cess and surcharge. But there is a provision in the Constitution that provides specifically for this, that the cess and surcharge can be exclusively the domain of the central government without forming part of the divisible pool with the states.
But Mr. Kincha, does it mean to say that the final price that you as a consumer pay will go up? Because that's the element of worry.
The finance minister intentionally made a statement that the GST collections in recent times have broken all records concerned. But one has to look into the fine print to understand the components of this GST. We have seen that world over, petrol prices have been going down, but in India, they've gone up. That's because the government has raised the taxes on petrol. Therefore, the duties on petrol have gone up, as a result of which the ultimate price you're paying for petrol is going up. And that is the sole cause that the contribution by the public towards the taxes on petrol is forming part of the major part of the collection towards indirect taxes. And therefore, if there is some sort of a relief that the government has had, is because of the contribution of the people towards specific, especially the petrol taxes and cess and surcharge, which has helped the government to say that we are meeting some portion of the collection, especially in the indirect tax front. They have been reasonably comfortable. Although in the direct tax front, they have not been able to achieve even 48% up to December. They were expecting about 13 lakh crores from personal taxes. They have collected only about 5.45 crores up to December. They're only meeting about 45% of the targets, and therefore the government is staring at a significant shortfall in direct tax collection, possibly made over marginally by the indirect tax collections, of which petrol is a significant contributor.
No, but my question is specifically on the impact on the consumer. Does it really go up? Does the
it goes up. Therefore, the government is able to calibrate the price of petrol to ensure that it comes to a stage that it believes the amount will be paid by the consumer concerned. So the landed cost of petrol and the add on the duties concerned to come to a derived price that the government finds comfortable that it can charge the consumers concerned. And we are witnessing that in the recent time, the petrol prices have gone up consistently. And that's only because of the duty structure being so altered to increase the ultimate cost to the consumer concerned. And in this time, therefore, your worry that we'll be called upon to pay increased amount towards a liter of petrol is possibly well placed to justify.
Okay. Mr. Kincha, one more question relating to the budget that spoke specifically about the residency limits as far as NRI returnees are concerned. It said that the number of days had been reduced from 182 days currently in existence to 120 days. Does it really boost the startup momentum as far as India is concerned?
The startup momentum can get encouraged because of adequate policy measures by the government concerned. And the government this year has said that we are bringing in certain changes to the Companies Act to permit one-person companies to function without limits on capital, without limits on turnover. So that's a segment of the entire population that have been taken up by the government for the purpose of encouraging. So not private limited companies, not public limited companies, not LLPs, not individuals, not partnership firms, but a one-person company is what is the target of the government to encourage. And they say that they can function without limits on capital, without limits on turnover. And the finance minister's speech also indicates that these type of companies would have the ability to convert themselves into either a private limited company or a public limited company without any hassles. Therefore, there will be some sort of a free way available to them to convert themselves into any other form of company is concerned. And in that context, the finance minister has said that generally these one-person companies are limited to Indians who are residents, but she's going to permit a non-resident who has been in India for 120 days to have the ability to incorporate himself into a one-person company. And that's the encouragement she's giving. And interestingly, therefore, these are provisions that should ideally find a place in the Companies Act. This is a budget that does not deal with Companies Act. Therefore, this is a policy statement that will possibly translate into an amendment to the Companies Act over the course of time. But what's interesting to note that these measures to encourage the startup do not find an adequate bridging gap under the tax laws. What do you mean by bridging gap? Under the Income Tax Act, a startup company is entitled to a tax holiday if its turnover is less than 100 crores. If it goes more than 100 crores, it's not entitled to a tax holiday. Although the finance minister makes a statement that you can function without limited turnover, that's the way I want to encourage the startup industry. But then you don't find a corresponding or a matching provision under the Income Tax Act. Two, she makes a statement that allows you free conversion from one form of company to another form of company. That freedom to convert is fine under the Companies Act. But if you're converting yourself into another form of company, logically, you could be called upon to pay tax on the appreciated value of assets over a period of time. Correct. The day you began as a one-person company, and on the day you're converting yourself into another form of company, if there is an appreciation in the value of the net worth of the entity concerned, you will be called upon to pay capital gains tax. Therefore, you protect that capital gains tax by ensuring that these type of conversions are tax neutral. But we do not find any provision to confer such an exemption under the Income Tax Act. A non-resident also, when he has the time limit of 120 days to incorporate a company or a one-person company, he is called upon as a resident under the Companies Act. He does not necessarily become a resident under the Income Tax Act, and therefore possibly you have to live with some sort of a disparity in the status of a resident for the Companies Act when you form a one-person company, and under the Income Tax Act when you apply Section 6 of the Income Tax Act to determine your residential status. And therefore, in that context, one does find some sort of an encouragement, but that encouragement is on a standalone basis. Ideally speaking, there should have been some sort of a coordinated efforts among the various laws concerned for us to have some meaningful reference to an encouragement you're trying to convey to one segment of the activity, economic activity, being the startup industry.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Kincha. And thanks a lot for all of you who've joined us. We'd love to have you share, comment and subscribe to TV9 News. And once again, thanks to Mr. Kincha for sharing his valuable inputs as far as the taxation front on Budget 2021 is concerned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us.